So anyway, Carrie, take it away. Unmute.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I get to introduce Josh. Dr. Josh Lively is the new Curator of Paleontology at Utah State University Eastern Prehistoric Museum in Price, Utah. Josh grew up outside of Birmingham, Alabama, and earned his bachelor's degree in geology from Auburn University. He then completed his MS degree at the University of Utah and his PhD at the University of Texas at Austin, where he graduated in 2019. The majority of Josh's research has centered around the late Cretaceous, or the last 34 million years of the age of dinosaurs. Josh will present new genera of mosasaurs from the Western Interior Seaway and the Diversification of Mosasaurinae. Take it away, Josh.
So thank you all again for coming tonight and checking out my presentation. I'm going to start. I know we promised a talk on mosasaurs, but I'm going to start off by introducing our museum, the Utah State University Eastern Prehistoric Museum in Price, Utah. We are open to the public. We've been open, I think, since the very end of August after a shutdown for COVID. So we're open on Mondays through Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So come check us out. We have some really extensive galleries for both archaeology and paleontology. Most of what I'll be talking about tonight, of course, is paleontology. But I was looking into the history of our museum a little bit, and it turns out we are one of the oldest natural history museums in the state. I think the Fieldhouse Museum in Vernal has us beat, but we are the oldest accredited museum in the state, and we're actually celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. And our strengths are really in Eastern Utah, both in archaeology and paleontology. So on the archaeology side, if you go over to the Hall of Archaeology, you're going to see a lot of material from the Fremont and ancestral Puebloan cultures. So quite a bit of stuff to check out on that side of the museum. But of course, I'm over on the paleontology side of the museum, and Jim will love this. What I really consider one of our strengths here at the Prehistoric Museum is the Cedar Mountain Formation. We really do focus a lot on the rock formations that are right around us in Price, both in the Book Cliffs as well as in the San Rafael Swell. And yeah, Jim can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have more holotype dinosaur specimens than any other museum in the country, based on my short research at least. So we're kind of the place to come, I like to think, for Cedar Mountain dinosaurs. And we have quite a few things that haven't even been worked on, haven't been prepped yet either. So I wanted to introduce the museum because we're really making a push to increase our volunteer program. So there are a lot of different ways that you can volunteer with the Prehistoric Museum. First off, with collections. My collections manager, Katie, has quite a few volunteers, but we always need more help, as with any natural history museum. So a couple of projects that we're going to have coming up in the next few months. Number one, making some support jackets for a lot of our larger specimens. One of our important specimens, the Huntington mammoth, that you can see right there on the left side of your screen, the size 10s there for scale. This is one of our more important specimens in the museum, and we really need to make a new support cradle, a new support jacket for it. So we're going to be enlisting some help from that, for that, as well as cradling a bunch of our sauropods from the Cedar Mountain Formation. We have quite a few large bones that, you know, if you're not supporting them properly, they can break under their own weight. So that's going to be a long, ongoing project that we're going to be starting here very soon. We're also going to be doing a lot of digitization projects. So this goes well beyond just photographing fossils, but also digitizing our archives, letters from our curators to other curators, as well as things like quarry maps. So if you're more inclined to volunteering in photography, we could definitely use you there as well. We have quite the backlog, just as every other paleontology museum has, of fossils that need to be prepared. So we would love to have volunteers come in and help us with fossil prep. On the right side of your screen, this is actually an amenodon from the Eocene that, or at least we think it is, something that our preparator Dave just recently prepared. But we also have this plesiosaur specimen that was excavated a few years back. It's in really hard rock, so we're actually going to be using acid prep to work through it, which is something I got to learn a good bit of at the University of Texas during my PhD. So if you're interested in doing traditional mechanical prep with air scribes, pen vices, or if you want to get your feet wet, not literally though, with acid prep, then you can come do that as well. And of course, my favorite part of the job, field work. We have an abundance of field opportunities in our area. And unlike a lot of other institutions, because we are literally surrounded by our field area, we really aren't restricted as far as going out into the field, even during COVID times. So if you're interested in checking out rocks from the Triassic, really up through the Eocene, you can come let me know and join us out in the field. I'll be releasing a more complete field schedule in the coming months. But pretty much as long as there's not snow on the ground, I get out in the desert and at least within a day's drive on at least a weekly basis. This outcrop photo is actually from one of our sites, one of my sites over in Colorado. Not all of our field localities are going to be quite this big. This is our good friend from NHMU, Tyler, for scale on this outcrop. But I promise if you come out, do field work with us, you don't have to hike up and down outcrops like this all of the time. I'll ask you to do it sometimes, though. Another thing that I want to announce about the museum, we're coming up into a season where we normally have quite a few school groups that come through and check out our galleries and take tours and everything. And that's going to be a lot more difficult, if not impossible, for some school groups to do this year because of COVID. So I wanted to make this announcement. If you know of an educator, not just here in Utah, but anywhere in the country or world, who's interested in taking a virtual tour of our exhibits, our collections, or just to do a Q&A with an archaeologist, a paleontologist, or our collections manager or preparator or anyone, let me know. You can pass along my contact info to those educators, and we'd really love to get into some digital outreach in the coming months, at least up until we can start welcoming school groups back into the museum. And a couple other announcements just while I'm talking about the museum and the local area in general. The Utah Friends of Paleontology actually used to have a chapter here in Price, the Castle Valley chapter. And in talking with the state leadership, I've got the support to get that local chapter going again. Having been through the paleontology program in Salt Lake City there as a master's student, I really saw how important UFOP is to advancing the science of paleontology at the state, local, and even the national level. So if you know of anyone in the area, if you are in the area around Price and are interested in getting involved, please send me an email. It's tough, of course, right now to meet in person, but definitely by maybe the fall and by next spring, hopefully, we can start meeting in person and having events and supporting our local paleontology. And another local announcement, this has been shared with a lot of the marine reptile researchers across the globe already. But next May in 2022, we are going to be hosting the 7th Triennial Mosasaur and Marine Reptile Meeting right here in Price. So there'll be people coming from just about every continent who study mosasaurs and marine reptiles to our meeting that happens every 3 years. And I'm really excited that we get to host the next one right here in Price, Utah. So if you're interested in any of these opportunities, I'm putting my contact info right here if you want to screenshot that or take a photo on your phone. My email is really easy. It's just josh.lively@usu.edu. So if any of those collections, prep, or field opportunities or outreach opportunities interest you, please get in contact with me. So before I start my actual research presentation, does anyone have any questions on the Prehistoric Museum or any of our volunteer opportunities? None? Okay. Well, I can go ahead. Oh, is somebody speaking?
Oh, Josh, we'll work with you and get that information out through UFOP social media and the website. So this is great news for us. So thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I should say too about the Mosasaur meeting we're hosting, normally those are usually for specialists, but this one, because you all are part of an active, engaged paleo community, I want to announce it to you all because I do want anyone that's interested in learning more about marine reptiles to come to that meeting. So we'll be getting together a circular for that meeting here in the next couple of months for our international travelers. You know, how the heck do you get to Price, Utah, but also where do you stay and that sort of thing. So yeah, if no one has any questions on the museum,
one thing, Josh.
Yeah, go ahead.
One last thing. You might want to grab a lot of these UFOP people and comb the mancos for a mosasaur.
Oh yeah, well absolutely, because you know, that was one question I was anticipating. Where are all the mosasaurs and the mancos? And spoiler alert, we don't have any. You know, we've got a couple of bits and pieces, but that's about it. So that's a big volunteer opportunity that I'm wanting to advertise. If you want to come hike the mancos, and it's all close enough to Price, you can basically do day trips and make it back to town and take a shower in the evening. So it's pretty nice. So we have a ton of mancos that isn't explored. So if you want to find more mosasaurs before we have the world's experts on mosasaurs come to Price, then hey, come on down and help me out. I can't scour all the Badlands by myself.
Josh.
Hey, Josh.
Oh,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Catherine, go
Fine.
ahead.
This is Katie Cornelli. I'm the collections manager. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Katie.
Wanted to read a couple questions from the chat. One person.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Katie.
One person said, "What are the age minimums for volunteering?" And I can tell you that we have a sort of unofficial minimum of 18 or 16 with sort of parental involvement, parental consent. And then as far as, there's another question that maybe you should answer. How closely do you work with USU grad students?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't had the opportunity to work with any grad students yet. I'm 3 months in person on the job. I already have an undergraduate researcher that I'm working to get started on a project, a pre-med student actually. So right now I haven't worked with any right now, but gosh, you know, any graduate students up on main campus or at any of the satellite campuses that are looking for research opportunities, we have a ton of them here in the museum for sure. Any other questions? Well, if not, then let's spend a few minutes talking about some really big lizards. Most of what I'm going to talk about today is from my dissertation research. I'm not going to talk about the whole thing. That would take up about 2 hours. But I'm going to talk about some high points and some of the more interesting new specimens that are coming out. Well, some new specimens and some old ones that are that I revisited during my PhD. So, as Carrie mentioned, I'm really interested in a period of time called the Late Cretaceous. So basically the last 33, 34 million years of the age of dinosaurs. The reason that's really interesting to me, and the reason why pretty much my whole research career has been based around it is because this is a period of very, very warm global temperatures. You take a look at the globe right there. If you're not familiar with the Cretaceous, one thing you'll notice, no ice at the poles. Sea levels were much higher than they are today, based on some high latitude studies in the Arctic and the Antarctic. Some of the sea surface temperatures might have been 20, maybe even 25 or 30 degrees warmer than they are today, depending on what proxies you use. So it's a really interesting study system to go back into the Cretaceous and understand the ecology of the animals living during that time, to potentially use as an analog for what is happening and could potentially happen to the future of our planet. So that's really my motivation for working on the late Cretaceous. And many of you, who are used to UFOP meetings have seen a map like this many times. This is a view of North America, the United States and Canada specifically during the late Cretaceous. And those of you that have worked in southern Utah with the Natural History Museum, working in Grand Staircase in the Kaparowitz Formation, you've worked down here on this little landmass called Laramidia. And that's actually where I got my start during my master's work, working on freshwater turtles from those deposits. For my PhD, though, I wanted to kind of dive in, so to speak, into the Western Interior Seaway deposits. Those deposits are stretch from basically my home state of Alabama all the way to Alberta, and have very nice, fairly continuous record of animals that were living in this seaway during the late Cretaceous. So this seaway, of course, waxed and waned over that 33 million year time period, but you had a good solid connection throughout a good chunk of that period of Earth history. And it turns out eastern Utah is a great place to study the Western Interior Seaway, its deposits, and the adjacent river deposits that were feeding into that shallow seaway. This is a view right outside of Price and Helper, and this shows you that those gray rocks that you see driving through along the Book Cliffs and the Wasatch Plateau through the Castle Valley, those gray rocks that you see at the bottom of those cliffs, those are all representing the deposits of the Western Interior Seaway, whereas those sandstones, the yellows and tans and oranges that are capping those cliffs are representing the river systems that are spilling out into that seaway. So really, Utah and eastern Utah is a great place to study the Western Interior Seaway. So I feel very fortunate to be based out of Price and surrounded by all of these rocks now. So when you're looking at the long-term evolution and paleoecology of groups of animals, it's best, at least I think, to find something that's really well sampled in the fossil record. The fossil record nature of it in and of itself is incomplete. So when you have groups of animals that are really well represented in the rocks, you can say a lot more about what's going on with their ecology and evolution. And it turns out the mosasaurs are really well represented in the deposits of the Western Interior Seaway. And mosasaurs and our understanding of them go back centuries. In fact, it was a mosasaur that was actually stolen by Napoleon and taken to Paris during the Napoleonic Wars that actually gave us the first indication of extinction. A guy named Cuvier looked at this fossil, and folks had speculated that this was a crocodile or maybe a whale. And Cuvier, being an expert in anatomy, looking at a lot of dead stuff and their skeletons, looked at this animal and said, "This is a big lizard. This is a really big lizard that lived in the ocean. These things aren't around anymore." Now, we're a group of paleontologists and paleo enthusiasts, and so the idea that animals that once lived on the planet are no longer around, that's no news to us, but to folks back then, this was front page news. Up until that point, folks were working under the assumption that species were immutable, that everything that was living on the planet always lived on the planet. So mosasaurs are actually really important to our understanding of extinction, as well as change in organisms through time. So mosasaurs, they vary in size. Some of the smallest ones were 1 meter in length, some of the early mosasaurs. Some of the others were quite large. So just to give you a sense of scale, this is an artist rendering by Dan Varner of Tylosaurus. And that bird that it's chasing, Hesperornis, is 6 feet long, and that makes Tylosaurus really big. So some of the largest mosasaurs we think were pushing 50, maybe even 55 feet in length. Very, very large lizards. And I mentioned, they are lizards. They're not related to dinosaurs at all. There is a lot of debate about whether or not they are more closely related to certain groups of lizards, like monitor lizards, or if they are more closely related to snakes. There's a nice lively debate going on about that right now within the mosasaur community, and it's always fun for me to sit back, watch, and listen to people argue over it. I don't really have a dog in that fight right now. I work further up the family tree of mosasaurs, so I haven't really gotten into those arguments yet. Our understanding of how mosasaurs lived has changed dramatically over the centuries that we've known about them. Originally, we thought of mosasaurs as these serpentine animals swimming through shallow seaways, but in recent decades, we've really learned a lot more about their biology, and that they were these very streamlined, dynamic predators that were really at the top of the food chain and food web in the marine environment throughout those last few tens of millions of years of the age of dinosaurs. And there are several different groups of mosasaurs. The ones I'm going to focus on today that I spent a lot of time thinking about for my dissertation are these called the Mosasaurines. These always interested me because they end up doing a lot of different things in their ecosystem. Early on, for the first 6 or 8 million years or so of their evolutionary history, these mosasaurs were relatively small compared to others, 20 feet and less. And, in my mind, were relatively boring. They all pretty much look the same, just generalist mosasaurs. But later on in time, we've understood, at least by 75 million years ago, that this group of mosasaurs start doing some really interesting things in their environment. And this is related to changing and diversifying shapes in their skulls in particular. Some were very much fish specialists, both based on their teeth as well as preserved gut contents, as well as other mosasaurs that were seemed to be eating just about anything smaller than their heads. And there are even some specialists like globidens that have these big rounded teeth that, based on modern critters that have similar teeth, were probably crunching on mollusks. So things like clams, oysters, maybe ammonites, and the few cases of preserved gut contents for these animals actually support that too. So I got really interested in this group of mosasaurs just because they go from a very low diversity group of critters to this highly diverse, highly disparate group that's really doing a lot of things in the ocean over the last 10 to 15 million years of the Cretaceous. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about here, some of my research objectives, talk about this pattern of diversification, not just number of species of mosasaurs, but get a handle on what they're doing in the environment. Especially with some of these new specimens that have come to light in the last few years that I'm going to be sharing with you. Some are published, some aren't. And also, taking some new looks at older specimens as well. And ultimately, we're going to talk about what these new specimens mean for what these animals are doing in their environment, which is really what I'm interested in. So for starters, this project took me to a lot of different museums. I think Last count was 19 or 20 different museums across North America and Sweden that I visited to see these many different mosasaur specimens. I don't remember the last count. I'm closing in on about 300 different specimens that have fit into this data set. So that ranges from some isolated bones all the way up to complete skeletons as well. So the first mosasaur that I'm going to talk about is this animal called Pronapodon stoutmani. This is one of those kind of poorly understood mosasaurs. It's actually in the collections at BYU. Right here in the state of Utah in Provo. So this specimen was originally published in 1999, but when you look through all the published literature on mosasaurs since then, one or two folks have made the trip to Provo to look at this animal to include in their projects. So compared to other specimens at Kansas and the Smithsonian and the American Museum, this particular animal really hasn't garnered as much attention as others. So because of that, I was really interested in collecting data from it, as well as working it into the data set. And one thing that was really interesting, kind of as a spoiler alert, is that since 1999, BYU, the preparators and volunteers have actually prepared more parts of the animal since its original publication. And those different bones that have been prepared since then are actually some of the more important ones for figuring out where this fits into the mosasaur family tree. So ultimately, I went to BYU and I saw all these new bones that weren't reported in the original paper. And talked to folks there at BYU like Rod Sheets, and they said, well, maybe you ought to write this thing up, do a redescription of this. So I did. It ended up working into a full chapter in my dissertation, which wasn't bad for spending 2 days in Provo. But after I collected data from that animal at BYU, I wanted to make sure that we had a good understanding of where this animal fits in time. And of course, to do that, you've got to go check out the rocks. And if you follow the original publication, there's not very super specific details on the exact site that this animal was found. You follow a path east, but it looked like you should go south. And checking with BYU, they didn't have the precise GPS coordinates from where this animal came from. So using one photograph and the kind of scant details on where this site was, I actually was able to track down this specimen based on those descriptions, and walking out to the site and seeing one particular scraggly tree. This image that you're looking at on the right-hand side of the screen is the excavation photo from 1975. The photo in color that you see on the left is from 2017. So thankfully, this animal was excavated from western Colorado, Delta County, near the town of Cedar Edge. And because it's such a dry climate, the landscape hadn't changed that much. So I was able to place this animal into the geology of the area, in large part thanks to Dr. Dave No, who's actually a graduate, I think, with his master's from the University of Texas as well. And he spent a large chunk of his career working for the Colorado Geological Survey, mapping out the rocks in western Colorado. He's since retired there, and I saw a great talk by him a couple of nights ago talking about geology and its effect on the vineyards in the area, which if you've never been to Delta County, you should check out the vineyards as well. But thanks to Dave's foundational work on the geology in the area, I was able to tie this animal into the rocks and have a better understanding of where it fits in time. So just a little bit more about Pronapodon stoutmani. It's from this unit that Jim mentioned, the Manco Shale. It stretches from Colorado all the way here to Price and Helper, Utah, and then really all over the place. This particular specimen is from a section of that unit that's between 81 and 79 million years old. Now, Dave's expertise in the geology was really important because in Delta County, Colorado, the Manco shell covers about 15 million years. So having his help and nail down where this animal fits into the geology was amazing. One thing that you don't really get a healthy understanding of unless you look at this animal in relation to this forklift that it's sitting on is that it's huge. The lower jaws of this animal are 4 feet long. That translates, based on some more complete mosasaurs that I've measured, to an animal that's about 9 to 10 meters or roughly 30 feet long. So this is a really big lizard. You can actually see this mosasaur mounted at the BYU full skeletal reconstruction at the BYU Science Center, as well as the Powell Museum in Green River, Utah. So I'm not going to go through all the anatomy that makes this animal interesting and what makes it important. But when it comes to mosasaurs, it turns out one of the key bones in helping you work these animals into a family tree is this bone in the jaw joint and the ear region called the quadrate. And so this is one of those bones that was actually prepared since the original description of Pronappodon stopmani. And when you look at it, it turns out it's got a lot of really unique features. And other members of this group of animals, group of mosasaurs called Pronappodon, they have this quadrate bone that forms a complete circle. 2 parts of this bone fuse up. It's close in Pronappodon stopmani, but not quite. It actually shares a lot of features with much earlier mosasaurs within this group. So not going through the entire skeleton, but I did put together a phylogeny, a family tree of mosasaurines. And it turns out no matter what sort of analysis you run, Pronappodon stopmani is not actually closely related to the whole rest of the group of mosasaurs called Pronappodon. So, long story short, this requires that we put it into a new genus, and I renamed it Gnathomortis stopmani. The new genus name, Gnathomortis, translates to jaws of death. This is because this animal had huge jaws, and one feature of the jaws that I'll talk about in a bit that suggests that this animal had a really powerful bite force. And this paper was actually just published last fall in September in the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology. So this is, I think, the first presentation I've given where I can actually talk about this animal's new name. So that's exciting. So that's one of the new mosasaurs, kind of a new look at an old specimen that fits into my dissertation. Another one is a brand new discovery from 2012 from Williamson County, Texas, which was just up the road from where I was studying for my PhD in Austin, Texas. This gentleman that's excavating in the hillside right here in the banks of this river is John Jackson. Him and his nephew, Artem, found a specimen along the banks of this river in Williamson County. You can't see it on this photo, but he actually has a name for this canoe that they were canoeing down the river on. It's called the Tylosaurus tail. You look at avocational paleontologists that love mosasaurs. John is up there. I mean, if you name your canoe after a mosasaur's body part, then you're hooked. But John and his nephew excavated this animal during the summer of 2012, and he spent a couple of years working with the fossils in his garage, prepared them himself. And I was giving a talk at the basically the Austin version of UFOP, the Austin Paleo Society. Paleo Society of Austin, and he came up to me after my talk on mosasaurs and said, "Oh, I've got something to show you," and showed me this one specimen that was fairly interesting. I said, "Okay, you should bring it into the lab sometime." He came into the collections with some much bigger boxes, and I said, "Oh, well, what's this?" And it was this good chunk of a skeleton of a mosasaur, basically from the hips forward all the way through a majority of the skull. So this specimen that him and his nephew collected, at least from the skull region, all of these bones highlighted in green are represented in his specimen. But then he also had quite a bit of the backbone and some of the flipper elements as well. And my first hunch was that, well, first of all, this thing's big. It's not quite Napamortus big, but it's pretty big. I've been spending a lot of time looking at these early mosasaurines called Clidastes, and I thought, well, this could be an example of maybe a new species of that critter, but it's very, very different. I spent a lot more time after he donated this specimen to the museum. Him and the landowners in conjunction donated the specimen to the museum. Spent a lot more time scouring through collections, museum collections all around the country. And of course, it would be in my hometown of Birmingham, Alabama, that I find a second specimen of this animal that was collected in Dallas County, Alabama, outside of the town of Selma. And it turns out this specimen has quite a few bones that overlap with the Texas animal that show that it is the same thing based on some unique features, but it also adds a lot more information to what we're understanding about this new animal. So this is a full reconstruction of the skull based on both the Texas and the Alabama specimens put together. So it's known from the Taylor Group and the Morville Chalk of Texas and Alabama, respectively. It's a little bit older than Napamortus. We know one of the specimens is about 83.6 million years old. The other one's a little bit younger, the one from Alabama. The skull length's a little bit under a meter in length, which translates probably to an animal in the low 20s as far as the full length of the body. And one thing that was very clearly different in this animal from other early members of this mosasaur group was the teeth. The teeth of these early mosasaurines, Clidastes, are all relatively the same as you move throughout the upper and lower jaws. In this animal from Texas and Alabama, as you move through the jaw, specifically the specimen from Alabama preserves this. The front teeth are really strongly curved, kind of rounded in shape throughout. The middle teeth are much more robust. They're almost, you could kind of relate them to railroad spikes. They're a little bit more compressed, but definitely not as slender as other mosasaur teeth. And they get to be more what I would call button-like further back in the jaw. This was interesting because I had seen this in other mosasaurs, namely that animal that I talked about, Prognathodon. You have these curved teeth at the front of the jaw, and then you move back, and these animals go kind of crazy with making their teeth really blunt and robust. These animals, based on the shape of their teeth, as well as what's preserved in some really nice specimens that preserve gut contents, these things were eating just about everything in the ocean, from fish, sharks, turtles, even smaller mosasaurs. Another aspect of this new animal from Texas and Alabama is from the back end of the lower jaw. You get this area that I'm highlighting here in green. I'll go back. It's this kind of bowled out area that us in anatomy call a fossa. So whenever you see this bowled out area that's marked by a little ridge right here on this part of the lower jaw, that's a site of attachment for a large muscle. The interesting thing is that Napamortus from BYU has that same feature in the exact same spot. Now, what is that? What does that translate into in the flesh? Do we have any examples in the modern where you can see that big fossa and that shelf on the side of the lower jaw? It turns out we do. So these are some line drawings from a couple of modern lizards. The one on the left that I'm highlighting there in green has that same shelf on the side of the lower jaw. This is an animal called Crotophytus, which is the collared lizard that if you spend time running around the canyons out west here, you'll see a lot of. And that's compared to this closely related animal called Gambelia, which is the leopard lizard. What do those critters look like in the flesh? this right here. So Gambelia doesn't have that shelf on its lower jaw, and it doesn't have big jaw muscles. The collared lizard here, Crotophytus, does have that shelf, just like Gnathomortis and our new animal from Texas and Alabama, and it's got these big, chubby cheeks. Now, these aren't chipmunk cheeks. That's all muscle. That's all jaw muscle. And what the animals like collared lizards do with that larger jaw muscle, they have a much higher bite force than other lizards of similar size, which ultimately means they can eat larger prey items. They can eat much larger lizards and other things. So if you've got smaller jaw muscles, you don't have that bite force, you have to eat smaller things. So when you see that signature then, which we can also see here in this slide in Prognathodon, this is a Prognathodon from Canada, and you don't see it in specimens like, in species like Mosasaurus, which were fish specialists. At least we think based on their teeth and their preserved gut contents. So basically, these two animals, this new species from Texas and Alabama, and Gnathomortis, are showing that around this time, potentially maybe 8-10 million years earlier than we previously thought with Prognathodon here, this group of mosasaurs is starting to eat much larger prey items. And that's telling us, giving us a really interesting part of the story in the ecosystem of the Western Interior Seaway, because these animals are not just eating things that are small, things like fish, maybe squid, but they're starting to process larger animals, maybe even other mosasaurs that they can actually fit in their mouth. Another neat thing about these mosasaurs, these new ones that I've worked into my dissertation, they help rearrange the family tree of mosasaurs. So these animals like Prognathodon that have the different teeth as you move through the jaw, as well as the indications for the large jaw muscles, they've always been assumed to be closely related to those clam and oyster-eating mosasaurs called globidens. They share a lot of features in their skull, so it kind of makes sense. When you fit these new animals that I've been talking about so far into the family tree of mosasaurs, it turns out, at least under one of my analyses, those clam-eating mosasaurs like globidens are actually more closely related to our fish specialists like Mosasaurus. And then things like Prognathodon that are basically the garbage cans eating everything that can fit into their mouth aren't all necessarily closely related to one another after all. Thankfully, there's a PhD student currently at the University of Alberta who's going to be working on Prognathodon and fixing that problem. I'm glad it's her and not me. But one thing that is really neat, if we map out where these new animals are falling out in time relative to not just time, but also the shape of their teeth, they're falling out during this period of time between about 84 and 79 million years ago, when you're starting to see new tooth morphotypes, so new shapes to the teeth in these mosasaurs showing up. So this is a period of time that's really important, apparently, for this group of animals, because they're starting to expand their diet. These new species that are evolving are starting to eat new things in the seaway. So that's really neat. And these new animals, the one from Texas and Alabama and Gnathomortis, kind of fit into this pattern right at that sweet spot in time. But I've spent a lot of time talking about the toothy bits of these critters. What about the rest of the skeleton? Because this kind of gives us a little bit more of an understanding of the broader ecology of these animals and just how similar they are to earlier mosasaurs within their lineage. So what I'm going to talk about here at the very end of my presentation is something called disparity. Now, if you're familiar with the term diversity, especially taxonomic diversity, that's just flat how many species there are in an ecosystem. You might have 30 species of birds in your backyard. You might have 2 species of trees, something like that. That's saying something about diversity. And in this diagram, different colors of circles here are different. I'm representing as different species. So within this example, we've got 6 different species of circles here. So that just tells you how many how many species you have. Disparity tells you how similar or how different those species are from one another. So in this example, we have the same number of species as you have on the left, but all of those shapes are very different. So they are very disparate. So disparity and running analyses then on disparity can tell you how similar these animals are across the entire skeleton to one another. So I ran one of these analyses with my anatomy data set with all of these hundreds of different specimens from at least, let's see, 30 species of mosasaurs within this one group. And this is how it plots out. So what you're seeing here, you're looking at 4 different time slices through the late Cretaceous, basically from 90 million years ago up to 66 million years ago. And what these plots are, they're called principal coordinates analyses. So this square, each square is representing the possibilities of what these different mosasaurs can look like, incorporating close to 200 different features across the entire skeleton. So if you see 2 different dots, which represent 2 different species, falling out on these squares close to one another, that tells you that overall, they look very similar to one another. If they're falling out on opposite ends of these squares, then that's telling you that they are very different. They're very disparate from one another. So over the first 6 million years of the history of this group of mosasaurs, you can see that they fall out relatively close to one another. These critters are things like Clydastes and some closely related organisms as well. During that sweet spot in geologic time, basically from 84 to 78 million years ago, that's when you start seeing an expansion in the disparity of this group of mosasaurs. And the 2 stars right there that I've got on that second square from the bottom, those represent our new Texas critter and Gnathomortis stoutmani. So one thing that I want you to notice is that this little purple star right there is actually falling out pretty darn close to those earlier mosasaurs. So that's telling you that all across the entire skeleton, it's actually very, very similar to some of those earlier mosasaurs. However, I kind of at length spent a lot of time talking about the toothy end of this animal, and specifically the jaws of this new animal are actually very different than these earlier mosasaurs. So that's telling you that even before the rest of the skeleton has changed dramatically from earlier members of this group, it's starting to do something different as far as what it's eating in its ecosystem. And then throughout the rest of the Cretaceous, as you would kind of expect with all of these different mosasaurs doing different things, the disparity is very high. So this is really neat because these 2 species, the new genus Gnathomortis and this unnamed animal from Texas and Alabama, they're kind of bridging the gap between these early, more what I would say, boring mosasaurs to the later ones that are doing a lot of different things in their environment. But especially this new one from Texas and Alabama is showing that before you get wholesale change across the entire body of this animal, you are seeing a lot of changes in the parts of the skeleton that are directly associated with what it's eating. So including these new fossils, just to conclude, does rearrange the mosasaur family tree quite a bit, which is important for the mosasaur geeks out there. But what I think is really neat about this part of my project is that it shows before you get this big diversification in the number of species of mosasaurs, this big increase in species numbers, they're starting to do some really different things as far as their feeding ecology before the rest of the animal changes dramatically. And these are all likely tied. These are likely adaptations for eating larger, more robust prey items, very similar to the large jaw muscles that you see in modern collared lizards that are also that have the ability to eat larger prey items compared to other lizards of similar size. So just to wrap things up, I just want to thank all of the museums, the curators, collections managers, preparators that helped me out on my travels, all the folks that let me sleep on couches along the way. It was very much appreciated, and too many people to thank, but definitely my PhD committee, my funding sources, and really want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share my research with you. It's great to be back in Utah permanently this time, and look forward to including as many of you that are interested in the research process here in Price. So thank you very much.
Yay, thank you so much, Josh. That was wonderful. We do have a couple of questions in chat.
Excellent.
So, how about if I read them off so everybody can hear, and then you can ask. You can answer them. All right. So our very first comes from PJ Stamler, and it says most of the niche partitioning of these mosasaurs appears to be related to skull morphology. Do we see any post-cranial morphology relating to said niche partitioning?
That's a really good question. So, basically, one of the things that I've noticed in looking all across the entire skeleton is that, so I spent all this this presentation talking about one kind of subfamily of mosasaurs. Depending on who you ask, there are 5 or 6. And what's really neat about mosasaurs is that in a lot of the cases, very early on, you get, kind of channelized. You get this one, postcranial anatomy, and that group of mosasaurs then largely sticks with it. A couple of examples, a couple of cases here and there where you do get some, increases in diversity in shape in the back end of the animal, but that's a lot rarer than changes in the skull anatomy. So yeah, there are definitely individual mosasaurs that start doing slightly different things with, say, their flippers or their vertebrae, but it's not as common as changes in the skull. So yeah, not quite as much. Some examples, at least in the one group of mosasaurs that I talked about. Again, it's when you get that big increase in disparity, it's individual genera that will slightly alter parts of, say, their vertebrae or their front flippers or something like that, and then they stick with that for 10 million years. So it seems like the postcranium of these animals isn't changing as rapidly as the skull, as what I like to call the business end of these animals.
Okay, and then Ian Garofalo is asking, will the new mosasaur from Texas and Alabama be published anytime soon?
Oh man, that's never the question you ask. I'm just kidding. I've got some collaborators and I that are working on it, and basically, I think we'll pull the trigger on it here in the next couple of months for sure. One thing that I'm working on right now is commissioning. I'd like to commission some artwork for it for sure. So yeah, it'll be coming out. My goal, knock on wood, is to see this thing published this year, but it'll definitely get submitted for publication this year.
Excellent. So we look forward to reading it. So Phil is...
And you all can hold me to that. Okay. Yeah, ask me next month at UFOP. Did you submit that yet? We're waiting.
Okay. Well, 2021 thankfully has several months to go yet. All right. And so Phil is asking, are the oldest mosasaurs from the Cenomanian?
Yes, they are. Yeah, the best record of mosasaurs starts in the Turonian, but we definitely have some things that are at least, loosely mosasaurs from the Cenomanian as well. That's actually one of the big questions, and you didn't mean to get this answer, but you're going to get it anyway. It's really this question of what actually constitutes a mosasaur. We've traditionally assumed that they are one group of critters, but some recent hypotheses have come out that suggest that individual different groups of lizards kind of took the dive into the ocean around the same time and evolved this aquatic lifestyle independently from one another. So that question of what actually is a mosasaur based on the family tree is still an ongoing debate, and I think it's one that some of my collaborators are going to be throwing some new data sets at in the coming years. So maybe. So the big answer to your question, at least as far as we know right now, there are some from the Cenomanian. I would like to find some in Utah from the Cenomanian. But I'm going to need some of you to come out and help me hike the mancos around here. There's some good outcrops. So.
Okay. All right. So then Danielle Montague Judd is asking, how does the expansion of mosasaur feeding ecology through time compare with the ecosystem through time in the interior seaway, such as changes in populations/ranges of prey items?
That's a really great question. And I don't have an answer yet. That's actually the kind of the last chapter of my dissertation that I started trying to explore. The problem is, it's comparing apples to oranges right now. You really need, if we want to relate this, say, to changes in the diversity and disparity of fish, or even potential competition from other groups, say changes in the plesiosaurs, you've got to do similar studies focused at a continent or ocean basin scale. So we, the short of it is we don't know so good yet. There's some things we could speculate about, but I think that talk, my goal is to give that as a talk in the coming years.
All right. So you have a lot of people thanking you for a great talk. So you can check that out in the chat.
Oh, thank you all for coming.
Jim also says
Josh,
he wants to see the artist reconstruction of the mosasaurs with those the jaw muscles. And
yeah, that's definitely one thing because very few folks. I feel like most people reconstruct mosasaurs the same, no matter what it looks like. Some of them with maybe a little bit of a shorter snout, but that's one thing that I'm going to be working with the artist on. Is really a reconstruction that'll show the definition of those really big jowls. And I think that's missing from reconstructions of things like Prognathodon as well. I think it'll be. I think it'll look like a kind of a weird animal. Maybe picture a big collared lizard with a much longer snout, and that's I think essentially what this thing's going to look like.
Okay. And Jim, you posted about a terrestrial ecosystem.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind people we're hosting the 14th Mesozoic Terrestrial Ecosystem Conference. It's an international conference held every 4 years, except this one was postponed for 5 years. It'll be the first time it's ever been in North America. So within a few weeks of the Mosasaur conference, there'll be a Mesozoic Terrestrial Ecosystem Conference based out of the Utah Geologic Survey and the museum. Within a few weeks in June here in Salt Lake.
Yes, because yours is in June, right, Jim?
Yeah, it's like the 9th through the 11th. I'd have to look at the calendar, but it's
okay. Yeah, I'm gonna. That was one thing that I wanted to do is make sure that our meetings were far enough apart from one another. But this one's always seems to be in May, so we're gonna try to put it in early May. So people don't get all of their conferences at the same time back to back. But
either that or they just arrive and stay for a while.
well, I mean, by then these might be some of the first conferences that we really get to go to after we get to full inoculation around the country and the world. So yeah, hey, let's just back all of our meetings up right next to one another.
So that's the last of the questions in the chat. I'll open it up. If anybody wants to unmute and ask a direct question directly of Josh, feel free. Give you a few minutes for that. Anyone?
Josh, this is Ron Long. Just a question. Have there been any stomach contents found in some of the skeletal remains? In other words, are we finding things like ammonoid shells and things of that nature?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's one thing that when I was talking about what these different animals are eating, that's one thing that we definitely base that off of. There's some level of understanding that you can glean just from the teeth, for sure. But we do have some rare cases where you do have gut contents preserved with these animals. So with and some of them have been published to varying degrees. Sometimes just put out in abstracts. So Pronapodon, this was published in an abstract. One of my PhD committee members, Mike Paulson, published this. One of their Angolan Pronapodon, I think there are 4 or 5 different species within one animal's gut. So that includes a mosasaur, a turtle, a fish, all sorts of stuff. But definitely some Mosasaurus specimens with fish preserved in them. There's even we've always assumed, based on Globidens' teeth, that it was eating clams and oysters, other mollusks, hard-shelled animals. And there's at least one specimen from South Dakota that does preserve inoceramid clams in the gut region. The one thing that I kind of wonder, though, this was actually brought up during the discussion after my PhD defense. That thing, if those really were preserved in the gut, that animal would have had to die basically right after it swallowed that inoceramid, because those shells are so thin, you would imagine that stomach acid would chew through them pretty quickly. So yeah, there are definitely some good examples that do help to back up this what our understanding is for what these animals were eating. So yeah, but with these new animals, we don't have any gut contents yet. So that's why I don't speculate what exactly they were eating.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any more questions? Just remember to unmute your mic. Okay, well, thank you so much, Josh. That was a wonderful talk, and we look forward to getting to see you at your museum and maybe even getting out with you in the field a little bit. That sounds like good. It's a great area you're in.
Absolutely. Hey, once the snow melts a little bit more, there's some rock exposed right now, but once the snow melts, just send me an email, give me a call, give me a week notice, and yeah, we'll go out in the field. Absolutely.
Excellent.